Okay, I've got my blue and cream yarn threaded up, and I've got a little bit of knitting in the cream yarn. Now, if I was just going to switch to blue and wasn't coming back to cream again, then I would just break the cream about 6 inches from the knitting. That gives me enough to thread a needle and sew in that end when it comes off the machine. And then I would get my blue yarn and just put that in the feeder, hold it underneath, and take the carriage across the knitting. As soon as I feel it start to grab that blue yarn, I can let go. Now, if I was going to switch to cream, but I knew I was coming back to blue after a few rows, I would instead take the blue out of the feeder, but don't break it. Instead, I'm going to just hang it on the end of the machine. And then I can get my cream yarn, put that in the feeder, hold it, and then when I want the blue again, I would take the cream out and switch places with the blue. So I'd release the blue from the end of the machine. Make sure that they're not twisted up here. So I'm going to put the blue in instead. And I can either put the cream back on the edge of the machine, but I usually just hold it out of the way. So I'll hold it so it slants down so it doesn't interfere with the carriage. And again, far enough forward so that it doesn't interfere with the carriage when I'm knitting. And then I can knit with the blue. And then it's easy enough to take out the blue, make sure these aren't twisted, put the cream back in, and knit with the cream. So the yarn that isn't being used just floats up the edge of the knitting. And if I was to knit more rows, say I was going to knit more than 1/2 inch or so of cream, but I knew I wanted to come back to blue, in order to keep these little floats fairly short, I can just hook the color not in use on to the end needle and then knit some more. And just every few rows, just loop that back up on the end needle. And then when I want to use it again, just switch out as normal. Now, if I wanted to switch to cream on the other side of the carriage, I have to do what's called knitting with an empty row. So I'm going to take the blue out of the other end, hold it on the edge, and now I have to come across empty with the carriage to get back on the right side as the cream. And on the silver reed machine, if you remember from one of the earlier videos, to get the carriage across without knitting, you lift up this little lever here, and that will stop the needles from coming forward. And then when you get over, you just press it back down again, and you can carry on knitting. If you're on the Brother machine and you want to use the free pass, then you would push the part button in the direction that you're going to take the carriage. So if you're moving to the right, you push that part button. If you're moving to the left, you push that part button. And as long as your needles are in working position, they won't move. Now, let's say I wanted to knit with a third color that isn't in work, and I only have a 2-color feeder. It is possible to get feeders that hold more than 2 yarns. For the brother machine, you can get up to 6. I think for the silver reed, there's a maximum of 4. But I'm going to work with a third yarn down on the floor instead. So I'm going to get my third yarn and I'm going to put it down on the floor. I'm just going to hold it there for the moment. I'm going to take the cream out of the feeder, hold it on the edge. Now I'm going to put the green yarn into the feeder and I'm just going to hold it. So my hand is going to be like the tension mast. So I want to make sure there's some tension on it at all times. It doesn't matter for the first row, I'm just holding it in place. But when it starts to knit, I'm going to not grip it firmly, but I'm going to put a little bit of tension on this yarn and let it feed through my fingers. When I get to the other end, I'm going to start lifting my hand up as I come back towards the carriage. So keeping tension on that yarn. You might want to move your hand a bit closer to the carriage. And you just carry on like that. So you lift up, going back towards the carriage, and then let it feed down, then lift up again. So you're keeping tension on that yarn the whole time. And you can work with lots of colors down on the floor in that manner. That was one of our videos from the beginner class at the Knitting School. To find out more or to watch the whole class, go to the website www.theknittingschool.online.